We've hit 2025 halfway through the decade, and so I'm combining my last 5 yearly top 10 videos of what I found was the best sapphic content I'd watched that year, and I've added in some updates too, as there have been some developments for some of this content. Because I'm still salty, I kept in the TV show that was meant to be on this list for this year, but didn't make it at the very end. Unorthodox. There isn't a lot of gay in this 4-part miniseries, but having said that, the thing that motivates a lot of the action in many ways is a result of the woman love woman element and the impact it had on the protagonist Etzi, who, at 19, marries because that is what is expected of her as a Hasidic Jew living in New York. Unhappy with the marriage and the restrictive life she's expected to lead, she escapes by flying to Germany to where her estranged mother lives. It is a masterfully crafted series that dives into Etzi's experience as she fights for her own choices, and Shir Haas, the actress, turns in a riveting performance. Primarily told in Yiddish, it is based on Deborah Feldman's 2012 autobiography, and perhaps it is for this reason that the series rings so emotionally true. Away. I didn't need to know much more than Hilary Swank was leading this diverse cast of characters on the first manned mission to Mars to get me interested, but when it also had a lesbian storyline with the astronaut chemist Lu Wang and the NASA translator Mei Chen, I was sold. Actress Vivienne Wu gives a masterful and subtle performance. The show balanced the mission and the drama of the people left behind well, and the last few episodes had me riveted as the mission faced what seemed like impossible odds. I'm very sad that Netflix cancelled the show, both for the gay and the show itself, but even so, it's still worth watching. Ratched. I mentioned this on my 10 really gay TV shows video, and it also made my top 10. It was wild, sometimes graphic, sometimes disturbing, but entirely engaging. I was uneasy about Ratched as a character and wondering just how disturbed was she as a result of her traumatic childhood and the time as a nurse on the front line. And just what would she do to save her brother? Was she past redemption? And with more seasons to come, that question may not be fully answered, but for now, through the love that she has found with Gwendolyn, it feels like she's not a lost cause, and I'm very curious to see where this show goes. Unfortunately, like a lot of TV shows on this list, the series has been left dead in the water, and it took 4 years in 2024 to officially get a confirmation via Sarah Paulson that this show, despite being a 2-season order, would not be returning. It ends in a good place for the Sapphic ladies, however. Everything sucks. Yes, I know, this didn't come out in 2020, but I finally watched it in 2020. And being a 90s kid, it has all the nostalgic feels that I could ask for. It's a simple, relatively uncomplicated story of boy likes girl, but girl likes another girl. Classic. Said girl is part of the drama group, and when the theatre sprinkler system goes off because boy wants to kiss girl who would rather be kissing the other girl, both girls get thrown together into making a Z-budget, shot on VHS alien love movie to satisfy the furious drama geeks. It has all the happy ending you could want to satisfy a sapphic shipper heart, so although the show got cancelled after 1 season, I was fine with that as the season ties up pretty nicely with only a few loose ends. Dead to Me. Dead to Me is a dark comedy about 2 women who are drawn together by the weirdest of circumstances, and it went queer in season 2. No, it wasn't between Jen and Judy, even though that would totally 100% work for me too, but between Judy and Michelle. The romance didn't last long because Judy was way too dysfunctional to hold that one down. While it was delightful to get a bit of lady loving in the show, my favourite part has to be the codependent friendship between the 2 leads as they try and extricate themselves from the trouble they're in, having killed each other's significant others, and I'm curious to where they're going to go in the 3rd and final season. Astrid et Raphael. Disclaimer, this series is all subtext in I totally want them to get together and I don't think the show will ever go there, but that doesn't stop my shipper heart from seeing all the potential and shipping it hard. They're just so sweet together and they are very clearly attached to each other. I loved watching the professional and personal evolution of their relationship over the first season as they go about solving crimes. It is entirely too heartwarming not to get a spot on my list. Indeed, I was correct. The subtext never went anywhere, and they even made efforts to give both ladies male love interests. It's been super popular, however, and while I haven't followed recently, I believe it's up to about season 5, with the ladies just as bonded as ever, I'm sure. Ammonite. While it got compared as the poor cousin to the Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I personally really enjoyed this film in a I didn't feel the time pass kind of way. Kate Winslet's performance in particular drew me in, and I honestly felt like I could hear each thought as Mary had it, all the tension, the reticence, the push and pull of her attraction to a grieving Charlotte. The shift from there to them becoming lovers was swift and surprising. I thought their love scene, the one that Kate gifted Saoirse for her birthday, was moving along. While many termed it bleak and far too laconic, I didn't mind that, although I did mind the kind of non-ending we got. While I have liked many a film with an ambiguous or unhappy sapphic ending, it still happens way too frequently for my liking. Prom. To counteract the bleakness of Ammonite, the prom exploded with all the loud, bright, and energetic joie de vivre that I could hope for. I have no idea how well it compares to the stage version of the musical, but I was crying by the end as Kerry Washington goes from full-on conservative homophobia to full acceptance of her daughter's sexuality, because wouldn't it be lovely if it could be that easy? While I felt a song or so could have been trimmed from the movie, overall it was wonderfully done, and I definitely had my toes tapping to all that razzle-dazzle. A Secret Love. This documentary also made me cry. Pat Henschel and Terry Donahue, baseball player in the all-women's league as fictionalized in the movie A League of Their Own, meet in the late 1940s and embarked on a secret relationship that lasted decades, coming out to their families only in 2009. The documentary follows them as they move into a retirement home together, reflecting on a lifetime of having to live their love in secret and how they found a way to be together in spite of being in a society that aligns them. It is both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Hannah Gadsby's Douglas. Comedian Hannah Gadsby's Nanette exploded on Netflix in 2018, and Douglas is her follow-up. While I don't think it quite had the depth of resonance that Nanette did, and does heavily borrow from Nanette in terms of its format, it is still a fantastic comedy set that is immensely watchable and had me laughing out loud. Hannah Gadsby turns in an impressive performance that this time focuses in more on her autism, so while the content is not overtly queer, it is queer by virtue of who she is. Special mention. Luis Melia. On the Spanish soap Amar es para siempre, Luisita Gomez and Amelia Ledesma found love in 1970s Spain when it was illegal to be gay. The show garnered such an international following that the network has created a web spin-off exclusively for their website set in the modern day, so essentially it's an AU fanfic and has done well enough that it's already in its third season. It's fun, self-referential, and a delight to watch.
Vigil, or Vigilant, as it seems the title changed according to IMDb, is a fantastic limited series with none other than Saran Jones, who, as you probably know, plays Ann Lister in Gentleman Jack. Here she is, queering it up again as DCI Amy Silver, where her job as a detective finds her solving a murder on a submarine patrolling British waters. Her only contact are the messages her colleague and ex-lover, DS Kirsten Longacre, is sending her as she investigates on land. Kirsten uses their history as a way to send cryptic messages, and throughout the series we begin to unravel not just the mystery, but Amy's past. The first few episodes are lighter on her affair with Kirsten, but this relationship only grows in importance as the series moves along. Totally binge-worthy.
Now, this was a surprise, at least for me, as it was touted as a limited series, but it was successful enough that they decided to offer up a season 2, where the ladies are on a new adventure, including motherhood, together.
Another show I binged embarrassingly fast was The Married Woman, based off the book by the same name. Set in the 1990s, Asta, a teacher and mother of two, is straining at the confines of her roles. When the man she was crushing on dies, she meets his wife, Peplica, and there is an immediate spark, and a love affair follows. This naturally causes tension at home as she tries to juggle her responsibilities and the need to explore who she is. I do have a beef with how the ending of the first season went, even if it did largely mirror the book, but with the promise of another season, I am hopeful that the ending is just another plot point in their story.
While there was talk of season 2, this is another show that has been dropped, and while I haven't seen any announcements about it, it seems after a number of years that it's safe to assume that it's finished, meaning our ladies don't get a happy ending.
For a completely different kind of show, Legends of Tomorrow is the kind of irreverent, hilarious fun that tickles my funny bone. An unlikely group of misfits live in the Wave Rider, a time-travelling ship, fixing history from all sorts of unlikely anachronisms. It's a show that doesn't take itself too seriously, whether it's saving the day with the giant teddy bear Bebo fighting a demon or impregnating the manliest of men with alien babies in his head. The show has no qualms going all out with the most insane concepts. In addition to that, Sarah Lance, the captain of the ship, is bisexual, and she gets herself a serious love interest in the shape of Ava Sharp, who is an agent at the Time Bureau. They dislike each other immediately, but like a good fanfic, that doesn't last. It's clear that their relationship is not frivolous, and in fact becomes the most enduring and important romantic relationships on the series. It is soft and badass, all at the same time.
While the show did end with our ladies in a great place, it did also end on a cliffhanger before it was unceremoniously dumped during the CW purge a couple of years ago. Still, totally worth watching.
Which is a very different kind of vibe from I Care a Lot, a movie that follows Marla, who defrauds old people by putting them in old folks' home and then selling off their assets. Yep, she is quite the despicable anti-hero, but once I got past my initial distaste, I found myself rooting for her and her girlfriend. Spoiler here, so skipped to the timestamp if you don't want to know, but what I didn't like was the ending, because honestly, why did she need to die? Seriously, pointless, as it added nothing to the narrative apart from punishing a woman for daring to be as ruthless as many fictional dudes. Despite that, I enjoyed this movie quite a lot. Louis Melia is another fun show due to its gutsy, self-referential and creative framing of episodes. I was tickled pink at the episode where the writers of the show wrote about themselves writing the show, at the one with the lovemaking scene where they acknowledge gay censorship, and our ladies getting to see their 1970s selves. With season 4 upping the episode to a more traditional 30 minutes, we've seen an evening out of the narrative without losing the comedic aspects I enjoyed. Not of the last year, Boys on the Side was a movie I'd long avoided because I had heard that one of the ladies dies, but I finally did watch it, and it's a great film, where 3 different women all come together to form a strong bond. Robin, played by Whoopi Goldberg, is a lesbian that falls for the straight girl Jane. Have we not all been there? And in spite of this being a film with big names rather than an indie film, as most lesbian films were at the time, Robin was quite simply out without much fuss, which was kind of a big deal for back then. Another film that came out earlier than this year is Heartland, which follows the story of Lauren, who following the death of her partner goes to stay with her conservative mother in Oklahoma. Broke and aimless, she is drawn to her brother's fiancée, Carrie, as she attempts to grieve her loss, which unsurprisingly makes things complicated within the family. It's a simple story, but well told with lovely chemistry between the ladies. As an avid watcher of Woman Love Woman content, I have watched many pairings in spite of not necessarily enjoying the actual show it comes with. But in this case, I can say that I enjoyed the show miles more than I enjoyed the actual Woman Love Woman pairing. This sort of female Lord of the Flies scenario sees a group of young women stranded on a desert island. As they struggle to survive, it becomes apparent that things are not as they seem. In amongst that, it turns out that Shelby, the cheerleading Southern belle, is not as straight as she seems either, and perhaps her homophobia towards Tony, who is out, is motivated by something other than hate. I felt like the pairing needed more development for me to buy into their story. More interesting to me is to see what the show will do next after a strong first season.
A season 2 has since been released, but alas it didn't measure up to the first season. In all honesty, it was a bit of a disappointment and was cancelled shortly after. It means that the mystery that was building won't find its resolution, and Tony and Shelby's love story is equally not fully resolved, although they seemed to be headed for a happy ending.
Arcane, the animated steampunk series based on the game of the same name, is set in the League of Legends universe. This exquisitely conceived series looks at the origin stories for characters of the upper city of Piltover and the undercity of Zorn, which the protagonist sisters Vi and Jinx come from. Partway through the series, Vi meets Caitlin of the upper city of Piltover, and a clearly gay-coded attraction evolves. While no declaration has been made in this first season, it looks promising that it is headed in that direction, but regardless, their relationship is not platonic, and I believe it has been confirmed by the show itself.
I mentioned Arcane near the end of this video as it recently released season 2, but let's just say that things definitely got gay for our 2 sapphic ladies.
The final video on this list is The Wheel of Time, a high fantasy book series adaptation. While the book version of the lead character, Moiraine Damodred, a powerful Aes Sedai trained in the art of wielding the One Power, is not canonically queer, the TV version had no such qualms and made explicit what is only hinted at in the books, namely that she is in love with Siuan Sanche, the leader of the Aes Sedai. They look to be star-crossed lovers because they are on a quest to, essentially, save the world, and their all-too-brief reunion quickly gives way to the needs of this quest. Not, however, before they gave us some gorgeous scenes between the two. I did a video on the show following the queer revelation that was episode 6, so go check that out if you would like to know more.
We've now gotten a season 2, which sees a little bit of trouble in paradise for Moiraine and Siuan, but we also have a third season coming our way this year, so I'll be tuning in to see how this later season goes.
Let me start with one that I think many of you will appreciate, A League of Their Own. Inspired by the original movie of the 90s by the same name, this series took the concept and made it about 1000% more gay. Using extensive research, a very queer and diverse creative team, it brought to life the experiences of many queer women who, when the men were busy off at war in the 40s, tried out for the first all-women's baseball league. The stereotype is true. Gay women love a baseball, and so it's hardly a surprise that, using historical fact, the Rockford Peaches were in fact quite queer. The show equally weights the adventure of these gaggle of gay ladies with the more fraught experience of Max as a black woman trying to forge a path in baseball for herself. What a delight to see her begin to thrive and meet a lovely lady along the way. It joins a small selection of shows that are very deeply queer, and what a delightful find for the year that's just been.
Sadly, the show got cancelled after a bit of a kerfuffle around renewal, which I was disappointed by because it was such a good show. It also means that the main ship of Carson and Greta end on them going their separate ways, and while I fully expected them to find their way back to each other, we won't ever get to see that on our screens.
Another show that's pretty queer is High School, which is based on real-life musician Tegan and Sarah, twin sisters, who discover their musical ability when they start high school. The show is based on the autobiography of the same name that they wrote about the years preceding their musical career taking off. It looks at how they struggled with their evolving relationship as twin sisters, with their identity and their first sapphic loves. It's a show that is quiet and calm, but in its subtlety creates a show that, given I grew up in the 90s, felt very relatable. But I think the appeal is wider than that. It taps into an experience of being a teen girl and not being mainstream and wanting to find your place. Along with Tegan and Sarah, it's written by Clea Duvall, who also directed it. You might know her from the cult classic queer film, But I'm a Cheerleader. With the first season ending somewhat abruptly and without resolution for a few storylines, let's hope this one will get renewed. I'll be honest, I was surprised I enjoyed it as much as I did.
This is another that was left dead in the water and took until early 2024 to announce it wasn't going to get a season 2. Again, a great shame. I enjoyed this first season a lot, and it left us with their story pretty incomplete.
The next on my list is also about teens, but this time it's set in the modern day with a decided Gen Z slant. When Vada is stuck in the bathroom with Mia, the school influencer, during a school shooting, they are both trying to deal with the fallout of that event. Feeling unable to express what's going on inside, Vada withdraws from her family and friends, but she feels a connection with Mia. Mia herself is isolated, but in a different way, with her parents often absent, and despite her influencer status, seems friendless. While it may seem that shared trauma is what binds them, perhaps it goes deeper than that. This is a very thoughtful and intimate film that delves into the repercussions of school shootings and the helplessness that comes with a system that refuses to protect its kids. And much of that was due to its compelling performances by the two lead actresses. I had to include this one quite simply because it's a precious gem and pretty much one of a kind because it's a rom-com but for teens. We've had a few buddy comedy films like Booksmart and The Half of It, but pure teen rom-com movies? This might be it. It also does its thing very well with snappy quips, good acting, and a lovely chemistry between the leads. It's set in a fantasy high school that I think many of us wish we could have been able to experience, where being queer was not a big deal and you could get on with embarrassing yourself in front of the girl you're crushing on. It's also very clear that this film was written by queer women, if only because they knew to have AJ's phone screen be Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie. I did a more in-depth review on this movie, so click on the title card at the top of the screen to hear more about that. The Steve Martin and Martin Short vehicle might not at first seem like a likely candidate for a sapphic storyline. And while Selena Gomez started out as a child actor, I have known her primarily as a singer, so having her suddenly acting along with these two comedy legends was, at first, a bit of a mind bend, especially as they make this unlikely but compelling trio of misfits as they investigate a death in their very cool old-school building and make podcasts as the murder mystery unfolds. You can be forgiven for thinking that Selena Gomez's character, Mabel, is quite straight in season 1, but it turns out that she's a bit more bi than you might expect when she meets Alice, played by Cara Delevingne. The question is Alice somehow involved in the murder that they're trying to solve? With the cliffhanger of season 2, it's unclear if Alice will appear in season 3, but it's fun and it's queer, and it was, ironically, given its grisly subject, a pretty comforting show to watch.
We've since gotten another 2 seasons of Only Murders in the Building, and season 5 is in the works. It seems that Mabel has not had another romance with a woman since, but you never know, it's certainly not out of the question.
For a bit of change of pace, I watched Rafiki recently as part of my 81 films and TV shows everyone should watch video, link in the title cards. This Kenyan film had long been on my list as I'd heard good things about it, and I was curious to see how a film, made in a country that had banned the movie due to its queer content, would portray its characters. I think it was an incredibly brave film to make by Wanuri Kahiu, who refused to change its hopeful ending to something more tragic to get past censors. As it is, it's a cute film that follows Kenna as she waits to find out if she can go to study medicine, and the romance that develops with the daughter of a local politician. It's a story that doesn't ignore the reality of being queer in Kenya, but neither does it bend to it, providing a more hopeful perspective for those that don't fit into the narrow boxes allowed by society. Another film that defied a more pessimistic reading was the Indian film Badhai Do, and is a lovely gay-lesbian solidarity film. Shardul is a police officer who is feeling the pressure to marry. Being a gay man, it makes things a little complicated for him, but he sees his opportunity when Sumi, a physical ed teacher, reports that she is being stalked by a man who is threatening to expose that she is a lesbian. He then offers her a lavender marriage where they can get both their families off their backs and live as roommates. This allows Shardul to continue his love affair with his boyfriend Kabir, and Sumi soon meets and falls for Rimjim. While things go mostly smoothly at first, difficulties naturally arise, especially with the interference of family who are determined to get them pregnant. Of the small canon of queer Indian films out there, this has to be one of my favourites, striking a good balance between the drama and the comedy, and providing a look at something that may be the only real option for some people given the culture that they live in. One of my favourite films of the year for sure. I imagine if you follow my channel, this show appearing on my top 10 list is hardly a surprise. I did a little casual fireside chat to talk about my overall feelings about the era of the 13th Doctor, which was not just the first female Doctor, but also the first sapphic Doctor. Exactly 1 year ago, we learnt that what we sapphics had been seeing for the last 3 seasons was indeed correct, that Yaz, 13's companion, had feelings for the Doctor. It was both exhilarating and frustrating because it came at the 11th hour and left little time to do anything about it. While I'm glad it was canonically acknowledged as mutual between the two women, the ending to their story was lacking. So you might be wondering why this even makes my list. Because in spite of all its flaws, it was still a ship that got me with its potential, and it's a show I enjoy anyway, silly as it is. Would I recommend it? Well, I guess I would, since it's on the list. If you want to get a better handle on the show, check out my Doctor Who Just Got Gayer video in the cards at the top of the screen. There are many levels to why I enjoy this genre-bending show. Kevin is the typical man-child often seen in multicam sitcoms. Alison is the wife. As long as Kevin is in the scene, the show plays out like a straight-up sitcom with its bright lighting, one-liners, and canned laughter. When we follow Alison out of the room, however, we discover the more somber reality of what it means to be the sitcom wife. Through this conceit, it deconstructs the toxic masculinity inherent in those kinds of shows and how it hides an abusive relationship behind the bright lights and canned laughter. After 15 years of this, Alison is feeling stuck, but the situation is also untenable, and so she devises a plan to kill Kevin, which she unwittingly pulls Patty, her longtime neighbour, into. Over the 2 seasons of the show, we learn that Patty is queer, and though she ends up in a relationship with the local cop Tammy, who is on their tail, I think she's sporting more than a little crush on Alison, which is why she keeps helping her out. Depending on how you read it, that stays more or less in subtext, but it's clear that they are each other's person. I thought it was a cleverly done show. This was one of the shows cancelled this year, and I have to say I'm the most bummed about this one because it was an excellent show with so much potential to go in an interesting direction. Starting out in 1988, it's based off a comic series when they are unwittingly transported 31 years into the future as part of a larger ongoing conflict between the factions of future time travelers. While trying to get home and avoid being captured, they meet their future selves, something that causes them to each reevaluate who they are. KJ discovers that she's into girls, something she already suspected as she is crushing on Mac, but perhaps she's not ready to deal with that yet. Unfortunately, we won't get to see KJ deal with it, or even if there's a chance of something between her and Mac, because the show was unceremoniously cancelled on a cliffhanger. Terrible, terrible decision. First on my list is Hacks. We got season 2 this year of the contentious relationship between the aging comic Deborah Vance and the young writer Ava, who is there to help her freshen up her material. Ava is established as bisexual, and that plays a simmering part in the storyline of both seasons. In season 1, there is a dream that has her questioning her feelings for Deborah, which is never explicitly addressed, but ends up underpinning the dynamic of the two. What is growing between them is a unique and deep bond that I love, both as a lesbian who had to live on subtext in the early days and as a person who loves true, meaningful friendships depicted on screen. And this is what's so brilliant about this show. It shows a delightfully complex and compelling relationship between the show's two protagonists as a means to explore meaning in aging, remaining relevant, and ultimately looking at the human experience through a painfully revealing and clever comedic lens. As for the gay, Ava is also seen having dalliances with a woman, and in one episode, they end up on a lesbian cruise. The TV show Station 19 made it onto my list of favourite sapphic offerings for the year because I was impressed with how they culminated seasons worth of story building between Maya and Karina to create a dynamic and emotionally truthful storytelling. They met in season 3, and by season 6, which released this year, they had been given a beautiful storyline that was at times joyful and sometimes dramatic. Beneath all of that, Maya had been struggling from the effects of an abusive father that had seen her take on coping mechanisms that made her driven and ambitious, but sometimes to the detriment of herself and her loved ones. Through her relationship with Karina, we get to see the breakdown of the marriage in a way that deftly took me on a journey of personal growth. Maya was forced, through her love for Karina, to face her trauma, and it was done in a way that felt human and truthful. And then from that place, we get to see them trying to find their way back to each other. It showed me that it was possible to create a beautiful, profound, romantic relationship that doesn't just stay in that beginning phase, something that feels like I've seen 100 times. I did a bit of a mid-season video of my favourite Maya and Karina moments, link in the title cards. The show has now ended after 7 seasons, which honestly a shame given what lovely representation it was, but it does have Maya and Karina end in a very good place. Les Amours d'Anaïs was a cute find this year. This French film follows Anaïs, a 30-ish woman who has spent her whole life flitting from one thing to another, from one lover to another, working haphazardly on a literary thesis, but unable and perhaps unwilling to root herself into anything. That is, until she happens to meet the wife of her latest lover, a successful writer who unexpectedly turns Anaïs's head. In typical fashion, she throws herself headfirst into pursuing this woman, and in spite of herself, the wife is intrigued too. There was something refreshing about this untamed protagonist going after what she wanted, with the type of unfettered energy that usually belongs to the youth. She walks to her own beat and will not be pinned down by anyone except perhaps this woman who's captured her attention, and only because she wants to be pinned down. There was something lovely and thoughtful about this one. Deadlock was an unexpected find this year. I did a full review of the show, I enjoyed it so much, but if you missed that, let me tell you about this delightful lesbian murder mystery. Dulcie is a sergeant where she and her wife live in the bucolic town in Tasmania, Australia called Deadlock. It should be a sleepy little town for the growing resident lesbian population, but it's anything but. Dead bodies are turning up and Dulcie finds herself having to work with Edie, a loud-mouthed, brash Darwinian detective who can't wait to pin the murder on someone so she can get out of Dodge. As they learn to work together, the body count of men is rising, but the murderer remains elusive. I love this show for many reasons. They made it quite gay, the town's characters are delightfully odd, and the clever script kept me guessing as to who the murderer was.
Just know that Edie is a bit much in the first few episodes, at least I thought so, but she does settle down. Definitely a top pick for the year. While Deadlock was set up to work well as a limited series, it has been renewed, and I saw that it finished shooting season 2 late last year, so I expect we'll get a new season this year. For something a little different, I thoroughly enjoyed Hannah Douglas's third comedy special with Netflix called Something Special. The special is about her wedding to her producer. You may remember her breakout comedy special called Nanette a few years back that took the comedy world by storm, and while this and her other special Douglas never quite hit the same nerve, she has solidified herself as probably my favourite comedian for the artistry of her joke telling. She has the ability to tell a narrative. This is not a small set of jokes and then on to another subject. She is telling a story filled with witty observations and unexpected quips, some jokes even being set up at the start only to be paid off at the end of the set. Best of all, Hannah is queer, which features heavily, especially in Nanette and Something Special, but you won't get the same jokes you might have come to expect regarding these subjects. I recommend you go watch all 3 of her specials if you haven't yet. This next one is not one I expect a lot will agree on. At least it seemed like the response from the sapphics on this one was relatively tepid, and look, if you're looking for a lesbian love story, agreed, this is not the movie to watch. I think it resonated with the classical music crowd a whole lot more. It follows Lydia Tarr, a renowned composer-conductor. When a young, talented celloist arrives on the scene, she is captivated by this woman in spite of being married with a kid. This will lead her down a path where her arrogant abuse of power is brought into the light, and in so doing becomes a study on how power can corrupt. What I appreciated with this film was the nuance. It definitely has that European sensibility about it, offering up what felt like a very specific kind of story, so much so that I actually wondered if it was based on a true story. It's a cerebral kind of film for sure. The role was written for Cate Blanchett and she is brilliant in the role. We also see Noémie Merlan in a supporting role, which you will remember from Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Speaking of complex sapphic ladies, I also really enjoyed Dead Ringers with Rachel Weisz in the leading role as the Mantle twins and the complicated relationship they had with each other. They work and live together as obstetricians and are looking to improve the experience for women when they give birth. This requires big money, and as they go about setting up their centre, Beverly, the quiet twin, starts a relationship with Genevieve, which Elliot finds difficult to accept. She is possessive of her twin in a way that means that something is going to give. This was a total mind twist of a series, but incredibly captivating. Rachel Weisz was in her element with this material, giving 2 distinct performances as each twin. It was also really gay. I did a review of the show, link in the title cards and the description if you want to find out more. For a lighter, more comedic tone, Double Parked is a series which looks at a lesbian couple who are trying to start a family. When they both end up pregnant at the same time, they have to navigate that along with the tensions of the relationship, preparing for the babies, and figuring out what their lives will look like. It's a delightful, bright, hopeful show, which sometimes is exactly what is needed. What I loved about it, besides the solid writing and acting, and also the fact that it's a Kiwi show, is that it explores an established lesbian couple, which is a bit more of a rare find. I also did a review on this. A second season released late last year, which was just as good as the first. It may or may not get a third season, although it left things in a pretty good and pretty complete place. After finding Season 2 a weaker follow-up to Season 1, the morning show stepped it up again for Season 3. This show follows the ups and downs and scandals of a morning news TV show. We catch up with Bradley, who, at the end of Season 2, had been invited by her lover, Laura, to quarantine with her on her Montana ranch. 2 years down the line, and it seems that it didn't quite go as planned, but their love affair might not be over just yet. This is while there is a possible acquisition by a tech billionaire going on due to financial worries, and a secret that Bradley is keeping that could not only blow up her career but her relationship with Laura. This is a clever show which looks at topical issues, and I think it's a great watch. Again, I did a review on this, just as I also reviewed this next one. To say that Nyad is a sports biopic film is deeply underselling this movie. It was so much more than that. It's about lesbian Diana Nyad, a marathon swimmer, who had failed to swim across the Florida Strait from Cuba to the Florida Keys in the 70s. She decides to try again when she turns 60. With her best friend Bonnie, also a queer lady, they set about making this happen, and this will force Diana to face herself and her past in order to find the strength to do this. It was a film not just about an amazing achievement, but also about queer friendship, something I truly appreciated seeing, and about the transcendence that comes from pushing the boundaries of what is possible. From this list, I think it's clear that I gravitated towards works that had more mature women in them, which I think makes sense since I'm no longer a spring chicken, but I think this also signals the amount of work that has come out this year that offered roles for older women to inhabit, and it's beautiful to see women aging and having complex and interesting stories to tell that go beyond just that basic love story we often get with sapphic film and TV. I'll start out with an obvious choice. This was one of the biggest releases of the year and it got a huge buzz going. I am of course talking about Agatha All Along. It takes the antagonist Agatha from the wildly popular Marvel TV show WandaVision and gave her her own show. In WandaVision, we have left her powerless and defeated by the Scarlet Witch, who imprisoned her in a spell that had her believing she was nothing more than the archetypal nosy neighbor from an American sitcom. When a teenage boy releases her from the spell, she goes on a journey down the mythical witch's road to get her powers back, along with a coven of dispossessed witches who each have their own goals. While the witch's road tests them, Agatha also finds herself pursued by her ex-lover Rio, the Green Witch, which brings up one of Agatha's deepest wounds. I did a review, link in the title cards, and while I have my criticisms of the show, overall the Agatha and Rio dynamic was really rather delicious, with so much scope for the imagination, and I did get caught up in it. It's also just a very queer show with pretty much the entire cast identifying as some form of gay. Now I have to include Wicked Part 1 because although the relationship between the two protagonists, Elphaba and Glinda, stays in subtext, it's subtext in the way Xena and Gabrielle is in subtext, you know? It kind of smacks you in the face, and the movie didn't shy away from giving us some beautiful, poignant, emotional moments between the women that just screams the deep love they have for each other, and then it's up to you how gay you interpret that, and I did a review about how it's a fantastic allegory for a queer narrative and comp het. The stage musical, which is what the movie was based on, has long been beloved by the queer community, and our sapphics have been shipping Gelfie, as their ship name is called, since it premiered in 2003. Although I imagine the fans of the book it was based on were also shipping it because there are some sapphic moments that include kisses and sharing beds. The movie was overall so well done and drew out the themes well, and the chemistry between Elphaba and Glinda was so on point, and it feels like this is the biggest film of the year with the most hype, well-deserved hype I'd like to add, and for it to have such strong sapphic overtones delights me. With Agatha All Along from Marvel, one of the biggest film and TV franchises, and one of the most successful musicals to offer witchy sapphic-laden content is a delight. I also found myself diving headfirst into the Sue Keefe ship from the soap EastEnders this year, and I was very impressed with the storyline that had been going on for over 3 years. The show looks at the lives of residents of a square in the east part of London. In 2021, a story began that follows Suki, who finds herself falling for Eve, but between her own internalized homophobia and the release of her husband from jail after he killed in a possessive, jealous rage, it takes her a minute to work through everything. Meanwhile, this intense and passionate love affair arises between the women, but with the situation tearing them apart, there is much angst to be had, but, like you know, good angst. It means we get to see some delicious tension between the women with some insane chemistry that is oh so satisfying. They ultimately get together and for most of this year have been allowed to luxuriate in their love, which feels so rare. Of course, being a soap, the happily ever after can't last forever, so things did get a little bit complicated in the last quarter of the year, but it also means we get some screen time from them and their love for each other still burns strong. I have to say that the performance by Balvinder Sopal really impressed me and played beautifully off Heather Peace's Eve. I did a fanish review of the couple, link in the title cards, and I also have a link to a playlist of the series in the description. Since there has been a fair amount of drama for the couple, good drama I might add, so I will most probably be doing an update on this channel about that soon. The movie Eva is not a recent release, but I did watch it this year and it was charming. It followed a young woman called Eva who is struggling with the death of her boyfriend. Deciding it's time to venture back into the dating, she agrees to go on a date, but the date goes sideways and distraught, she finds herself on the rooftop of a building. There she meets Emily, who, seeing her vulnerable state, invites her to stay the night at her place. They begin to hang out and a sweet relationship blossoms, although is ever ready for something more. It's a sweet and simple story and the best kind of low-budget indie that has a kind of fly-on-the-wall, cinema verite aesthetic that makes for a charming film with some lovely performances from the two women. It's a reminder that low budget doesn't have to mean low quality. I have a link for the movie in the description. Australia came out with a solid murder mystery series, High Country, this year that has a lesbian couple at its centre. Set in the Victorian High Country of Australia, Andrea Whitford is transferred to take over from the retiring sergeant with her wife and kid. She is thrown into an investigation of a number of missing people in the area while her wife finally begins to paint again, forcing her to revisit the tragedy that led to her stopping. With both women so busy, with the teenage daughter acting out, it puts a strain on their relationship that could spell the end of their marriage. And this is happening just as Andrea is about to discover something that will change her life forever. I did find the show at times failed to truly grip me despite some insanely beautiful cinematography and solid acting from the entire cast. I had hoped for the Aboriginal element to play more tangibly into the show, but the ending drew all the threads together in a way that felt satisfying and made the show better. So, even though this is not my fave of the list, I do recommend, especially if murder mystery, crime drama, and sapphic ladies are your thing. In the wake of Agatha All Along and the love affair I was having with the two actresses that play Agatha in Rio, Kathryn Hahn and Aubrey Plaza, I of course had to go looking for more of their gay content, and Mrs. Fletcher was a find. It follows Eve Fletcher, who with her son off to college finds herself with an empty nest. For the first time she gets to explore who she is and what she wants, and when she winds up on a porn site it ignites desires she didn't even know she had, namely for women and for a young man in the writing class that she starts. As she finds the courage to act on these desires, she is taken on a journey of awakening and to the realization that her life is not over. Her son Brendan is also on a journey as he navigates college, and it forces him to confront his unconscious privilege. The show is artfully told, and it was a delight to watch Eve go on her journey, played beautifully by Kathryn Hahn in an affecting performance. The show is also pretty queer in an unassuming kind of way, from Eve discovering her bisexuality to Amanda, a lesbian love interest, Margot, a trans woman who gets her own love subplot, and Brendan's gay roommate and his boyfriend. It is R18, so while I did a review of this series, I had to keep it to my Patreon because YouTube would simply not handle it. You'll find other exclusive videos, a video podcast where I recap and review every episode of the OG lesbian TV show Xena Warrior Princess in all its glory, and a database of closing in on 500 film and TV shows with sapphic characters in them that can be filtered on various criteria to surface content you may want to check out, with handy links to my reviews on them. I had heard about My Old Ass, which features Aubrey Plaza, and then also heard that it wasn't all that gay. I guess because Elliot is hooking up with a girl at the start of the film, but ends up falling for a guy. And I get the urge to see sapphic content where the major love story is between two ladies. I'm simple, and that's what I generally gravitate towards, but to dismiss this movie because the love story involves a guy is to miss out on a gem of a film. Elliot thinks she knows her sexuality, she's a lesbian, and she's been crushing on her dream girl forever. With her pending move to college weeks away, she finally gets the courage to make the move, but she realizes that what she thought she wanted isn't what she actually wants. When tripping on mushrooms, she meets the older version of herself, played by Aubrey Plaza, who warns her away from a guy named Chad for reasons she won't disclose, and this is the beginning of a journey to discover who she is and what is important to her. This is the second feature by writer, director, and actress Megan Park, who also made The Fallout, a film that made it to my top 10 in 2022, and here she brings another thoughtful and well-crafted film that flips the script on coming out. While Aubrey doesn't get a lot of screen time, she is delightful, as is the actress who plays her younger self, Maisie Stella. It's a sweet, uplifting, and queer coming-of-age film. Blue Jean is a film from 2022 that I got to watch this year, and it was a lovely find. It deals with Jean, a PE teacher and closeted sapphic in the late 1980s, who is navigating some deep shame around her sexuality during a period of UK history where Clause 28 is a major talking point for the country and looks to ban people from what they call promoting homosexuality. Afraid of losing her job, she keeps her personal life a secret from her work colleagues, but when a new queer student in her class sees her at a gay club, club. Instead of reaching out a hand in solidarity, she is afraid, and it means she's not able to be there for her student to protect her from being bullied for being queer in school. This is a wonderful little film that looks at how keeping quiet perpetuates cycles of shame, and I definitely do recommend. Now, these last two are really special mentions because they made it onto my list from last year. However, with both releasing new seasons, they also numbered amongst my favourite content of the year, and given I didn't find anything else to replace them, they get the 2 final spots. Hacks came out with season 3 in the first half of the year. The series follows Ava in her mid-20s, who finds herself writing for the aging comic legend Deborah Vance. From this emerges an unexpected codependent mentorship that tests both women. Ava is bisexual, and we can see her having liaisons with mostly women. Season 3 steps it up with that when she has a serious relationship with a woman, while also dishing up a definite tension between herself and Deborah. While thematically I doubt they're heading for them ever having anything romantic, their relationship is delicious to watch, and the writing is clever and funny. I definitely recommend. Double Parked came out with its 2nd season about a lesbian couple who has been trying for a family for some time. When both women fall pregnant at the same time, they must now navigate choppy waters to build their dream of a family, which causes tensions between the two. In season 1, things came to a head but was interrupted by the arrival of the children, and we pick up in season 2 with the ladies now having to deal with the challenges of newborns while also dealing with their relationship. Now, while this sounds dramatic, this is in fact a lovely uplifting comedy. It doesn't shy away from the issues it raises, but it does have a light touch. The 2nd season was just as delightful as the first, with both women navigating being young parents and grappling with things that have been said and can't be taken back. Sweet, poignant, and funny, I recommend you give it a go. Also a quick mention that Arcane, the steampunk adult animated series that I mentioned in a previous top 10, released its 2nd season, but I haven't had the time to watch it yet. And it indeed went the gay way, as had been heavily teased in season 1. I've heard it's just as good as the first season, which is fantastic, so you may want to check that out too. Now, to the piece of content that I was intending to add to this list but haven't, it is Harper and Phil from the New Zealand soap Shortland Street, which has been an incredibly gay soap, but given how things have gone, I just can't. Not only did we lose Nicole, the long-standing bi character of 15 years, in the most appalling storyline that felt honestly quite disrespectful to such a legacy character, but then they go and kill Harper off, the other long-term bi character who had dated Nicole on arriving in Ferndale in 2014 and then recently had an affair with surgeon Phil this year. I'll make a final video going over the utter disappointment of the Harper and Phil ship, just to have closure on my multi-part series, but I was duped so hard and should have known better. The only redeeming element is that they still have 2 sapphic characters and a gay couple in the main cast, which is pretty unprecedented for a soap, but they also killed off 3 sapphic characters in the last year and a bit, and sent another off to jail, or maybe it's an insane asylum. Jesus, what was I thinking? So this show is not on the list. Let me know your top films and TV shows for the year. I need some good content to sink my teeth into, and until next time, lady lovers.